Hi, Mindy. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Paula. It's always lovely to see you.
I'm excited to just get into this conversation about how you got involved with Equity Arc and all the great work that you've been up to for the past, I think, like 2, 3 years. So without further ado, let's get into it. I am really interested in hearing how you initially got involved in doing equity work, and if you could share a little bit about your philosophy around it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long journey for me. I started playing violin when I was 4 years old, so a long time ago. Um, my studies took me to many different states, and I really had an opportunity to see how the performing arts were so different, in those states that were more diverse and those that tended to be a little more homogenous. Um, just seeing how this field thrives when there are more voices represented. So when I was teaching out in Colorado, um, I had the opportunity to teach in multiple school districts, those that had more resources and access and those that didn't. And I think one of the things that, just struck me is there were these kids who were so excited and motivated and talented, and they just didn't have the support system to, move that forward. And I think, really put into context for me that quote we all hear, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so that really kind of lit more of a spark that I wanted to do something in my career that would help build equitable opportunities. Um, so then I was planning a move back to the East Coast, and I had, heard of Stanford Thompson and Play on Philly, and I was like, okay, I need to meet this guy, I need to talk to him. Um, and so this was even pre-pandemic that we met. And I was like, okay, well, I'll let you know when I'm in Philadelphia. And then, of course, the world changed. Um, and he reached out and he's like, hey, I have this new kind of initiative that I'm working on. Let me know if you're interested. I was like, oh, yes, I am so interested. Um, I really believe in this field. And I think that it's something that's too important to be limited only to a select few. And so I really got involved in administration and equity work because it opens the possibility to have impact on a larger scale. And I wanted to be able to do something to make change. And I guess just, wrapping up on philosophy, it's just that this field is going to be so much more impactful and so much more robust when it represents the voices of all who want to be involved. Um, those who have passion should have opportunity, and I want to be involved in making sure that opportunity exists.
That's awesome. I I'm wondering, were you familiar with Pathways work specifically before your involvement with Equity Arc? And I'm just curious about you talk about how there's a lot of talent with few opportunities, and we know that Pathways pre-college programs provide those opportunities and kind of bridge those gaps. So yeah, what was your familiarity with the work and your general impressions of it now?
I was not familiar with Pathways work at the time. And of course, as soon as I got involved with Neiman at the time, um, you know, TDP and Adrian Thompson, and, the way that that program has really, you know, been critical in the development of so many more programs is just incredible to me. And seeing what these programs are doing and the way that they are advocating constantly for their musicians, and also taking the feedback from musicians and changing the program to make sure that it's responsive to the needs. I think it's just so cool.
Yeah, it's really amazing like what we're able to do. And this is what I want to get into the bulk of our conversation because you were here for pretty much all of Equity Arc, formerly Nemon's origins. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, those initial conversations, and what, when you started getting involved with Equity Arc and how different programs have came from there. So whatever the first one was, I think it was the Common App, but it might have also been a convening. But I just love for you to kind of go into that.
For sure. So I came on board after that first convening in Cincinnati. So much of the groundwork had been laid, and this idea of a coalition built on collaboration, you know, had been crystallized a little bit. But in terms of, the success at these early stages, I think it's really just the energy and enthusiasm for what we were doing, and the fact that people wanted to be part of a collaborative effort. They were so generous with their time and expertise and, coming together and saying, okay, what do we need? How can we make this happen? And um, just a willingness to be in the same room and share ideas and say, okay, this is what we need. Let's make it happen. Um, we also can't talk about Equity Arc's early success without emphasizing the generosity of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra and, of course, the Paul M. Angel Family Foundation, because their belief that this coalition, needed to happen is what made it possible to accomplish as much as we have in such a short amount of time. Um, I would say a challenge, and this is a great problem to have, but there are so many exciting ideas and there's so much enthusiasm about the work that we're doing, um, that we're kind of building the infrastructure as we go as well. And so we have opportunity and we have these programs that we want to develop that are responsive to the field. And so we're getting our feet under us and making it all happen at the same time. So it's exciting. It's definitely some juggling. But we're also fortunate to have a board and leadership and a phenomenal team, who are all collaborating and excited to move the work forward.
Yes, this is what we get when we are looking at all the stages of musical development. And I
Mm.
think that's just a really unique approach, like looking at when someone first starts to play an instrument all the way to the professional stage and everything in between, and looking at, okay, what are the resources that are needed, and us doing our best to kind of meet those as well. It's a really
Mhm.
unique concept that I'm excited to be a part of.
Yeah.
But after those initial convening conversations and you were a part of implementing, so who were those key partners outside of, Cincinnati Symphony that really you got a lot of traction from initially, that propelled, the work forward?
Yeah, for sure. Um, you know, of course, organizations that are a little smaller and more self-contained are able to make decisions and become engaged sooner. And actually, our very first member ever was the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative. Um, so again, like those organizations that can say yes and move forward. And of course, it's just harder with larger organizations. There are more people involved in decision making. So even though there's like agreement on the mission and vision of what we're doing and buy-in, it just takes more time. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of people in the field who believe really strongly in this. And so they were energized, like, we were ready to launch. They were like, yes, we are here for it. Um, let's just see what we can do together.
Yeah, no, that's great. And a part of what we're discussing has to do with capacity building. And that's something that's been really huge and really top of mind. And I always find it interesting coming from a arts organization, a local one. And so that fundraising was always a huge piece there. But as we are a national service organization, that's really been an interesting point for us as well. And so I'm wondering if you could kind of talk about that journey, from us coming from, we're still in those like startup phases. And so what has been that process of generating not only, member support, but also financial support for this work?
Yeah. Of course, I mentioned the Angel Family Foundation, who I think just sets the bar so high for what it means to really have impactful philanthropy. They Of course, we had the benefit of collective knowledge that built this organization. So there was a lot of expertise that came together, which I think made it easier to support such a young organization. But the fundraising and the foundation funding landscape is difficult. There's a lot of relationship building. There's a lot of, we need to prove ourselves. We need to demonstrate what we can do. And it can be challenging to do that operating with limited capacity. So I really, I can't say enough how transformative the Angel Family Foundation and their approach has been to our success.
Yes, what I'm hearing is it's like, believe in the people and we can make it happen. So I love that, and I think that is part of the collective approach. And going back to the Angel Foundation and Pathways work and with the origins of the collective, just them stepping in there and offering funding, and I'm hoping, that can be a model in the future as well, where foundations are seeing the great equity work that's happening across the nation and continuing to support that work collectively as well.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
well, I want to get into some of the programming. We're reminiscing on some of the early stages of EquiArc, but one of the first official programs was the Common Application for Summer Study. And so how did that program come to be? What was that process of getting buy-in and developing a shared audition list and working with different partners?
Yeah. I mean, I will say developing this initiative was fun. It kind of, it started with an idea and it snowballed into life. And it was a little crazy that from when we had like our very first partner meetings to when we actually launched the common application was like 3 months. So there was a lot of, belief and energy to make it happen. And it couldn't have happened without a core group of partners who believed in the idea of collaboration. So Katie Llewellyn, who was at Interlochen at the time, she is one of our board members and was a very big advocate of this initiative. Um, and she had an amazing network of people to connect with, which is how we first started conversations with Accepted. Of course, we needed a platform to build this thing on. And next thing I know, I'm talking to Jerry Tsai, their president, in a Zoom. And I was like, oh, hello, here's an idea. And he was like, I love the idea. We want to make it happen. This is something that we as Accepted believe in. And so they were like, let's see, how do we build something that hasn't existed before on our platform? Um, and so then, meeting with prospective partners was inspiring. People came into the room focused on why and not getting stuck in how. And I think it was really cool to see how challenges became opportunities rather than barriers, which isn't to say it's like, okay, yes, here we go, we're ready. There were conversations, there was a lot of exploration that had to be done. And I think people believed in the work that they were doing and they just wanted to figure out like, how do we get more musicians to benefit from it? And I think, of course, that focus on musicians is what really helped propel things along too. This is ultimately an initiative that serves the musicians. And so keeping them kind of center stage helped move things forward. And I will say it's really cool now that we are, in our third summer, getting ready for our third summer. All of the partners from our pilot year are still involved. And really, their willingness to be adventurous and be bold and say, let's do it, made it happen. And our partners are incredible, what with being very flexible, very communicative, and also going above and beyond with the support that they offer to the musicians. And just, being able to build this pathway, from the musicians we're connected to these summer campuses is really incredible. And then after the pilot year, which again happened a little, we decided we could plan for a long time, or we could just roll it out and see what happened and then figure out how to improve in future years. And so we had this debrief, and people were just willing to be candid and problem solve collectively. And So with that, we were able to make some really great adjustments. On one hand, adjustments that definitely benefited the musicians, and then also adjustments that benefited the programs and like how it works to actually accept the Common App. Um, and I will say I have to again go back to accepted, because every time I bring a new idea or like tweak, how can we do this, to our representative, Eric, he's energized by the challenge. He's like, yeah, let's figure out how to make this happen. So they've just been incredible in terms of figuring out how to make this thing continue to work and evolve. Um, and then the shared audition list was again a really exciting thing. And it's something that we've seen a lot of resistance to. And in this space, it was okay, let's try it. Which couldn't have happened without, again, a willingness to share information around repertoire and be flexible. And, we talk so much about the importance of sharing information. And so it's really cool in this space to see people willing to, be candid with it. And, Common App, shared list, there's always going to be things that we can improve. And there were challenges, especially around the audition list. And so this year we've had an opportunity to improve that a little more, and we are figuring out ways to continue that growth in the future.
I love that. I feel like I'm hearing a lot as it relates to relationship building, like how it's really important for you to have connections and strong trust with the partners, with the summer study partners, but also with accepted. But then also making sure we're hearing from musicians as well and creating something that really benefits them. And I think that's something we try to do in all of our programming. And that all takes time, and it takes a process and transparency. And so I really like that the things that we're requesting, from our members and partners are the things we're also trying to model as well. So
For sure. And it's also so interesting to see, the people that you start engaging with and communicating with through these processes. I talk to a lot of parents, for those younger students who are applying perhaps for the first time and who just want a little more guidance, or, have some questions that they need answered. And so it's really, I think this initiative kind of encapsulates so many of the pieces that need to be moving together in order for the musicians to advance. So it's the parents, it's the programs, it's the musicians, and a willingness to communicate, to make sure the information is there, and then to do something with it.
absolutely, absolutely. And parent engagement, that's, I know, on our list, on our huge goals of making sure that we're doing that even more. And it's nice that the Common Application gives us a little sneak peek into everything that is really out there and all the needs that really are there, and resources we can provide. Because also summer study spans all stages of musical development as well. So it's nice that we're able to have this initiative to just get a little finger on the pulse in these aspects. So with the Common Application, which is, like we said, it's in our third season, and we encourage anyone who's listening or watching to apply if you're eligible. But another initiative we have is the National Collective for Musical Pathways, which we touched on a little bit earlier, but you were also part of rolling that out, and also in tandem with that, the National Pathways Festival Orchestra. And so can you talk about how that came to fruition, what that process has been like, and we can get into it.
Yeah, for sure. So the pathway space, just to begin with, is incredible. I'm, just blown away by the work that these programs are doing, and the generosity and investment of every person who is involved with administering a Pathways program. And so this idea first, kind of rose a little out of necessity, that there was going to be an end to one of the major streams of funding in the Pathways space. And we had to have a, very urgent conversation about how do we make sure that this work continues, because it's proving its efficacy, with programs like Project STEP that have been around for 40 years, and TDP, of course, 30 years. we're seeing what these musicians are doing. And, you know, that support, that holistic mentorship that they got in these programs, you know, we see what's happening from it. And so we needed to come together and figure out, how do we tell a larger story of impact? How do we raise the visibility? And how do we work together to strengthen programs? So this first kind of convening festival orchestra um, started to come to life with conversations with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and their interest in kind of featuring these musicians during their Chicago Youth and Music Festival. And knowing that we wanted to bring these musicians together was also the perfect way to bring administrators together to continue conversations in person. So we had months of lead up conversations, working groups, planning meetings, all to set the stage for, how do we formalize some kind of collective, if you will. And throughout the process, and I, you know, had the opportunity to be involved in every single planning conversation, and just the generosity and willingness to share information. And again, you know, similarly to the Common App, wanting to collectively problem solve is what made this all possible. And I think this space really seems to recognize that something that benefits any one program benefits all programs. And so, you know, there's a lot of enthusiasm to share. And also realizing that if any one program ceases to exist, it's a loss to the entire, you know, network of this work. And that willingness to share, to believe that better things come from collaboration than competition, is what makes it possible. And of course, then we got to Chicago and we had almost 50 musicians, all coming together. It was, you know, still kind of COVID time, so it was a lot of extra considerations around that. But just seeing these young musicians connecting with peers from across the country, who some of them knew each other from summer study, and some were new connections that they were making for the very first time. And just having that focus, and then knowing about these really intensive strategic conversations that were happening behind the scenes to make the work possible, is incredible. And of course, we're already seeing a lot of traction from what this collective approach does. Of course, the Paul M. Angel Family Foundation and the stream of funding that they opened for Pathways programs, you know, as you referenced earlier, shows what philanthropy can do and how life-changing it is. And then again, that willingness to kind of recognize impact and the history, and come in to make sure that the work continues. It's just incredible.
Yes, and we've been able to expand now too, because we have a programs manager, and the collective is growing, of course, as well, with new programs joining. And then organizations are wanting to make Pathways programs now, which is a really unique position that we're able to be in as well. So it's all very exciting, honestly.
It is. And I just have to tack one more thing on that, you know, we know there are all the programs across the arc, and these ones over here in the late stages only exist when these ones in the early stages happen. So seeing orchestras or conservatories or schools of music that are investing in this kind of pre-college training, I think is, you know, just such a cool way of seeing this journey happen in real time, and showing what the investment at the pre-college stage does.
What lessons we can learn from Pathways programs? How can those lessons be applied to other stages of the arc?
I think it really all comes back to, well, two things. Number one, that I know I have said many, many times, is the collaboration and willingness to be open, transparent, share information. That is what makes it possible. And then on the other hand, is that these programs are so self-reflective, that they're constantly working with their students and their families, their faculty and program staff, to figure out how to improve. You know, and I love that they're such dynamic programs, that they're constantly kind of having new evolutions of what they do and new opportunities that they're providing to their students. And so I think, those two pieces really just make this particular space fascinating, inspiring, and they're so much fun to work with.
Yes, definitely. And then part of our Pathways Festival, as you had mentioned, are those convening or summit conversations. And, when I went to my first in-person convening, it was so different than any other conference I've been to because it focuses a lot on strategic conversations and, like you said, collaboration and, having a desired goal as that's part of those conversations. And so I'm wondering, like, in your times being here, what are some key takeaways that you've learned from these convenings?
I think the first one is just recognizing the opportunity of having people in the same room who wouldn't necessarily connect otherwise, and just being able to share information. And that informs so much of the work that happens. Um, and of course, our first year in Chicago, we were all coalesced around this Pathways work and figuring out how to move it forward. And I think it really just set this incredible precedent of people wanting to support something and bringing all sorts of varied expertise and thoughts into a room. And of course, Cincinnati the following year was a huge, huge growth in the number of people who were involved. And it just, again, was this opportunity to connect people from across the arc, across the country, who want to do the work. And it's been so refreshing and encouraging to see people, again, willing to have conversations, willing to have hard conversations too, being self-reflective, doing the work, being open-minded. And I think, you know, that's some of the things that I really love about our convenings, and something that we'll continue doing. And just, I love people being willing to work together and not kind of, hoarding ideas.
I definitely agree. It only helps us and the musicians at the end of the day, when we are being open and transparent. Because when I have conversations with members, it's always so interesting to hear that there are similar challenges all across the country. Like, yes, there are differences as well, when it comes to like the geographical political environments of each place, but there are many similarities and things that everyone can learn from each other. And there's also initiatives that we can do together. So it's great to have these times to convene where we're able to put these people in the room together, like you said, and come up with these ideas and eventually, actions and programmings and initiatives coming from it. And so that kind of leads to the future for us. It's been an exciting time because our team has continued to grow, went from having you as the only full-time employee to now having 4. And so with that, I'm wondering, what are some of your hopes and goals for Equity Arc in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, from a kind of basic standpoint, I hope, of course, that we continue to design and roll out initiatives that make tangible change. And just keeping this collaborative spirit alive. As you mentioned, we are learning that so many programs and musicians are facing the same issue, regardless of where they are in the country. And it's a reminder, it's pretty impossible to make systemic change alone. So being able to connect is, I think, just such a powerful thing. I'm, of course, really excited to see what our musicians are accomplishing in the next 3 to 5 years. Some of our first cohort of National Pathways Festival fellows will be pursuing professional training at that point. They'll be on their way to professional careers, and that's just so exciting. And I think, another thing is just finding creative ways to continue featuring our members and our musicians and the work that's being done, because it is powerful. And I want to bring more attention to the incredible work that's happening and also what happens when people are willing to work together.
Yeah, I love that, especially with our alumni, because that's one of our goals as well, is continuing to engage our Pathways alumni. And so and we're already doing that, which is really cool, being able to bring them back to the Pathways Festival. And so excited to do more of that as well. Another kind of future aspect that we're keeping our eyes on is, of course, in relation to affirmative action and other legal challenges. It's because, you know, with this changing environment, there are a few different legal roadblocks that do, you know, impact our journey in advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm just wondering, what do you have to say, you know, to folks who are still eager to level the playing field in classical music, but there is a fear of legal pushback?
Sure. You know, it's a difficult situation. And of course, there's more questions than answers right now. But I think as a chronic overthinker, it is really easy to be held back by the what if. It can be paralyzing to think about, okay, but what if this happens? What if this happens? Right now, this particular ruling it's focused on one very small little piece. So I think that there are ways that we can figure out how to continue the work in ways that are not legally problematic. Um, I know that there's a lot of considerations, and I know it's kind of a scary time out there. But I think, again, willingness to have the conversations is really important. You know, the work we're trying to do is too important to not advance. And I think trying to keep moving forwards in an informed way. Um, you know, I hope that things don't continue to deteriorate as some things have. But I also know that all of our partners, um, you know, this doesn't change their commitment. And I think that that's a really important piece of it. Um, so, you know, my words, I guess, are just let's keep talking. Let's keep figuring out how to move forward in a way that's not going to, of course, you know, jeopardize partners, um, but still make sure that the musicians who want and need these opportunities are able to access them.
Yes, I second that. Well, we're wrapping up our time in this conversation, but I ask everyone this question. I am wondering, what do you envision for the future of classical music?
Yeah. You know, I am excited to see this field continue to push boundaries and be bold. We've seen a lot of change throughout, you know, the centuries of people who make change. And I think that there's incredible creative voices who want to be part of that. Um, and it's been really inspiring to see what the young people we work with are capable of. And so I'm excited to see what they do in the future. You know, I envision seeing our fellows on stages, um, and that those stages represent the diverse voices who have had the equitable opportunities to achieve their dreams.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, McGee, for taking some time to chat. It's just really great to hear and learn from you. And thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have to say one final thing, because there's always one more thing, which is that the work that we're doing would not be possible without the incredible people on the Equity Arc team. And I know, of course, you were the first person I hired. And just the amount of difference that you have made at this organization, and the engagement that you have raised has been really incredible. And of course, Jade has just started a couple months ago, but like her ideas are incredible. And so I'm really excited to see, you know, how she continues to push our work forward. And of course, you know, our fearless leader, Stanford Thompson, who, you know, he's always doing everything. So, always excited to learn from him of how to balance all the things at all the times. But really, what we do wouldn't be possible without the people. So I would be horribly remiss to not acknowledge everybody on the Equity Arc team.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I know Jade and Stan do too. But yeah, it's a great team. It's a great place to be able to do this work, and so I'm very grateful and very much so looking forward to what we have in store in the future.
Oh, yes. All the exciting plans all the time.